Hello, I'm Max Stewart. Today I'm going to be analyzing the Black Mirror episode, the USS Callister. I'm mainly going to be focusing on actor network theory or ANT. My goal is to show how the episode makes visible that the ways human and technologies act together to create power, control, and resistance. I'll summarize the plot, explain three scenes that use ANT very strategically, and then finish with the key takeaways and a discussion prompt. Okay, quick plot summary to set the scene. Robert Daly is a VR programmer and the CTO of a company. He's brilliant but socially isolated, and he ends up building a secret private simulation based off of a show called Space Fleet, which is essentially a Star Trek knockoff. He uses biological material from coffee cups, gum, lollipops to get DNA of his coworkers and then clone digital versions of them into his game. In the virtual world, he casts himself as a godlike ship captain and programs the rules to force all the clones of his coworkers to obey him. The copied crew are not just background characters, they're fully embodied within the simulation. They suffer whatever punishments Dali uses on them, and they're humiliated. Over time, the digital crew organizes, resists, and ultimately reconfigures the game. They learn to manipulate the code and trap Dali's avatar into infinite space. Um, the episode contains examples of technological domination as well as technology-enabled resistance, which makes this ideal for talking about Ant. Okay, so for a quick primer on the actor network theory, ANT is a sociological approach that treats both humans and non-human technologies, documents, or machines as actors or actants within the social network. Three ANT ideas that are particularly useful here are first of which being actors and actants. They're anything that changes the state of a network can be an actor or an actant. Secondly, symmetry. Ant uses human and non-human actors on the same analytical footing so that a piece of code and a person can both be um, casual. They can both be on the same level of, yeah. Um, Third, we're you can use translation, which means the process by which actors align interests, redefine roles, and reconfigure networks. Ant doesn't assume that structures exist prior to interaction. It looks at how networks are assembled and how power flows through them. With that conceptual toolkit, um, we can treat things like the DNA scanner, I'll get into that later, um, or rules as active participants in the story, not just as passive tools. Okay, so for my first example and scene from the show, it will be the DNA scanner Dali uses to clone his coworkers into the game. Um, In the episode, Dali collects physical traces from coffee cups and lollipops as pictured here, uh, and then adds them into his scanner, and it produces a digital copy of that person for his VR environment. From an ant perspective, the scanner is a non-human actor. It translates discarded physical material into a new social category, a replicant or clone in the virtual network. That translation is crucial. Dali's power is not simply his personality, but it's made possible because the scanner mediates transforming DNA into clones. into essentially his virtual subjects. The device changes how identity is represented and how agency is distributed. Because the scanner can produce a functioning digital person, it supplies DALL-E with the raw material of domination. Without the scanner, he couldn't populate his private virtual reality world. So Ant pushes us and basically says, who's doing the acting here? Is it DALL-E or the DNA scanner? Um, it's definitely a combination of both, and the network they form together. Okay, for my second example, I'm going to use the code that he uses in his virtual world, which is allows him to control people. Um, so is a great example of symmetry in action, because inside the simulation, DALL-E programs rules. The clones who disobey, they're silenced, their mouths were removed. They he removed their private parts. They can get muted or physically punished. In one scene, a girl is turned into a monster, which like it's pretty brutal in the episode. These actions are not purely physiological. It's literal manipulation, which is given to him by the code he wrote for his game. Ant symmetry says we should attribute causal effects to the code itself as much as to Daly's intent. The code is an active enforcer. It implements, punishes, and restricts movement to control the clones. Daly's authority is co-produced by his will and what he put into that coded system. If the software wasn't designed the way it was, his abuse would be limited or impossible. But since he made himself a godlike character, he can do anything. Code without a human operator that's inserted doesn't, it can't work. So this shows a good um, coexisting of technologies, human and technologies. Social order in the simulation emerges from a coupling DALL-E desires and its code capacities. It's hard to blame all the responsibilities just on the code because DALL-E is the one who made it. So you can't blame technology. You blame how the human interacted with the technology. Okay, for my third scene, I'm going to talk about essentially the last half of the episode. All the clones, they come up with a plan to essentially dethrone this king-like figure in DALL-E. Um, they reach out to one of them in the real world to kind of blackmail him, stop him from being able to clone them again, so they steal all the DNA. Um, this is a good example of translation and network reconfiguration. So the clones are just human proxies with constraints on them since they are just coded into the game. But they develop a collective strategy by forming an alliance, pulling their strengths together, and what they know about code to exploit the ship's system. They hack part of the code and use non-human actors like the ship, the mechanics. Um, they figure out what code is vulnerable, um, and they also figure out what the code will let them do to change their position in the network. At one key moment in the show, the clones trap Dali's avatar, rerouting his account into an infinite virtual loop. So essentially, they trapped him in a version of the game that didn't get updated. So he kind of got stuck where he was. Um, Ant highlights how the interest shift, the clone's identity changed from passive victims to active agents who realign the other actors. the code, the ship systems, to their goals. Translation here is literal. The actors redefine roles and reassign power. The network that sustained Dali's control is reassembled into a network that secures the clone's autonomy. This demonstrates Ant's claim that networks aren't just static, they can be remade through collective action that includes non-human elements. This picture right here is the moment where Dali realizes he's trapped in his universe. Um, all shuts off and he's kind of stuck there. This right here is they're executing their plan to get him away from his scanner so that they can use it to contact the real world. Okay, a few takeaways from Ant and this episode. The first is technology is not neutral. The devices, code, and interfaces actively participate in shaping social relations. So Dali, without his code or without the game he created, he wouldn't have had these fake relationships with people. But it ended up bringing in the clones in real life ended up figuring out and helping the clones in the game. So, secondly, power of these technical systems is distributed. The authority emerges from the network. So at first it was Dali, but then as the technologies work together to create this network of systems, um, it became part of the clones and not just Dali in the real world. And third would be that networks are malleable. What looks like a fixed domination can be reconfigured through translation, sometimes by unexpected alliances, like in this show, people and technologies work together. USS Callister dramatizes both the danger of unchecked technological power in the hands of an abusive user and the possibility that the same technology, when mobilized differently, enables resistance. These lessons apply beyond sci-fi. They speak to workplace surveillance, algorithmic governance, and who controls architectural platforms of the world. This can be kind of seen through like in life today. It doesn't just have to correlate with this show. Okay, and for my last slide, it'll be the conclusion and discussion. So it encourages us to ask who assembles the networks and what shapes their behavior, and how might the networks be remade through interaction with humans and non-human actors. Platforms like social media, workplace monitoring systems, so the ASU firewalls that we have during classes like this, and even game engines like anti-cheats, that kind of things. They all incorporate actors and actants in the ways they distribute power, human and technological actors. The USS Callister gives a clear illustration of that dynamic. Um, so I wanted to pose a question, if you've made it to the end. Um, so do digital platforms more often reinforce existing hierarchies or enable new forms of collective agency and resistance? That's kind of that's a broad question that I think worked well with what we saw today in the USS Callister. Thank you very much for listening to this. And if you have any questions, put them below in the yellow dig discussion.